Chapter 5. Brie woke the next morning achy and sore. She couldn't remember the last time she had stood for so long. A massage was definitely in her future, but not today. Today she had a date with Jesse, and though community service didn't sound fun, she needed an opportunity to get closer to him to win her bet with Ariel. She dragged herself out of bed and shuffled to the shower. Hot water would have to do for now. Even though she had showered the previous night when she got home, Brie let the water fall over her for a good 10 minutes. It didn't ease all the knots in her muscles, but it helped. After she finished and dressed, she wandered into the kitchen. Normally, this would be when she either made or ordered herself a cup of coffee. But after working all day yesterday, she had no desire for the brew. Instead, she settled on a chai tea. She had just finished the warm drink when her intercom sounded. "Miss Carter, there is a Jesse Calhoun here to see you." The voice of her doorman echoed throughout the house. Rinsing the cup quickly, Brie hurried to the front door and pressed the speak button. "Yes, I'm expecting him. Send him up." She took a moment to check her reflection in the mirror. Her long, blonde hair had held the curls this morning, and they bounced against her shoulders. And the eyeliner she had chosen made her eyes look like emeralds. It was a nice look, if she said so herself. A moment later, the knock came at her door and she opened it to Jesse on the other side. "Private doorman, huh?" He looked casual in a pair of jeans and a polo shirt. Brie shrugged and hoped her voice had the nonchalant tone she was going for. "Goes with the territory. Would you like a tour?" He glanced over her shoulder at the expansive space and shook his head. "I'm good. You ready?" Brie nodded and followed him into the hall, closing the door behind her. But she couldn't get her mind off his reaction. He hadn't seemed interested in her money at all, nor had he wanted to see how big her TV was or how many channels it got. He hadn't asked to sit on her Italian leather couches. It was refreshing, but also odd. Was he really that unconcerned with whom she was, or was he playing with her? She'd have to keep a close eye out to discern. "So, where are we going?" she asked as they stepped into the elevator. "It's a surprise." He punched the button for the ground floor and said nothing else. Brie bit her lip. Getting him to open up would be harder than she thought, and she was running out of time. The doors opened, and with a purposeful stride, Jesse crossed the lobby to the front entrance. Brie hurried to keep up with him. As he pushed open the door, the sounds of New York descended upon them. The constant chatter of people on phones, the shuffling of the crowds on the sidewalks, and the sound of car horns stuck in traffic. Brie loved New York, but one reason she loved her penthouse was that it was an escape from the constant noise of New York. Jesse led the way to a blue truck parked along the street. Not many people in New York drove trucks. They preferred tiny, economical cars they could squeeze into tight spots. But somehow the truck fit Jesse. He opened the passenger door for her, and Brie smiled up at him. She was used to having doors opened for her, but mainly because she had a driver. She couldn't remember the last time a date had done so for her, unless he also had a driver. Brie slid into the seat, and Jesse walked around the truck and climbed in the driver's side. He started the engine, and Brie looked over in surprise when Christian music came from the stereo. She supposed she should have expected it since Brendan said he went to church, but Brie knew a lot of people who went to church on Sunday, but lived differently during the week. Even though the traffic was bad, Jesse kept his cool composure as he pulled out into the sea of cars. Nor did he yell angry diatribes when they were stuck for 10 minutes in a traffic jam. "How are you so calm?" she asked, when she could contain the curiosity no longer. Jesse glanced at her out of the corner of his eye before returning his focus to the road. "Well, for one thing, my job requires it. I'm the sniper for SWAT, so it's my job to stay somewhere and keep my calm until the action starts. 2, what difference would yelling make? Will it make the cars go any faster?" "No, I guess not." "So why get fired up about it? God is in control, and we'll get there in His time." "You really believe in God, don't you?" He glanced at her again. "Do you not?" Brie took a lock of her blonde hair and twirled it in her fingers. "To be honest, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess I believe something created this world, but I don't know if I believe in a God who watches out for us." The corner of Jesse's lips pulled up into a smile. "You've never needed to trust Him. Believe me, one day you will, and then you will know He's there." "Have you had that need?" "Lots of times." He didn't elaborate, and Brie didn't push the subject, though she was curious as to what he had faced. Half an hour later, they pulled up to the children's hospital. A knot of emotion clogged Brie's throat. She had never been in this hospital, but she remembered going to the hospital often when her mother had been sick, and she hadn't stepped foot in one since her mother's death. "We're going here?" Her voice was pinched and soft. "Yep, it's what I do when I have time. Bring toys to the kids who are fighting diseases. Some of them have been here so long they start to lose hope. I try to remind them of some simple joys in life." Brie nodded and tried to swallow her fear. She knew what these kids were going through. Well, not exactly, but close. While she hadn't been the one sick, she had spent enough time watching her mother lose her battle with cancer that she had been one of those kids who gave up hope. "You okay?" Brie didn't feel like sharing her sob story with him yet, so she pasted a brave face and a smile on and nodded. Jesse grabbed several bags from the truck bed and handed them to her to carry. Brie struggled under the weight, but she was determined not to complain as she normally would have done. She could tell Jesse would be turned off if she acted like a spoiled rich girl. He grabbed the remaining bags, twice as many as she had, and led the way to the hospital entrance. As the hospital doors opened, she struggled to control her breathing. The last thing she needed was to have a panic attack right now. "Well, hello, Officer Calhoun." A thin, black lady smiled and made her way over to Jesse and Brie. "The children will be so happy to see you today." "Hey, Nancy. Sorry it's been so long since I've been in. Work has kept me busy." "We understand that. And believe me, the kids are happy to see you whenever you make it." "Thanks." He gestured to Brie. "This is my friend Brie. She's going to help me deliver toys today." Nancy turned her kind smile on Brie. "Welcome, Brie. It's about time Officer Calhoun brought a pretty girl with him." Brie felt her cheeks blush at the insinuation. So Jesse didn't bring many girls here. That made her feel special, but only for a moment as he jumped in. "Not like that, Nancy. Just friends." Nancy's face took on one of those, sure expressions, but she nodded and said, "Okay, whatever you say. Let me get you your visitor passes and you can head on up." She led them over to the desk and tapped on the computer's keyboard. "I know how to spell Officer Calhoun here, but how do you spell your name, hun?" "Brie, like the cheese." Jessie snickered and glanced at her. "Were you named after the cheese?" Brie put her hands on her hips. No, it's short for Brianna. It's Celtic, and it means strong. His eyes traveled the length of her body, and he smiled.
You might stick with the cheese story. It's a little more believable.
Brie swatted his arm in mock anger, but she knew he was kidding. And as this was the first time she had seen him start to loosen up, she didn't want to break the moment.
Come on, I want to introduce you to my friends.
As Jesse led the way to the elevator, Brie's stomach knotted again. Would she be able to handle seeing kids going through the same pain her mother had? The doors opened and they stepped into the elevator. Brie could feel the walls closing in on her. She needed to do something to distract herself. So, how long have you been doing this?
3 years, I guess. My church issued a challenge to do something for someone else, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. That night on TV, a commercial came on for St. Jude. I couldn't cure cancer, but I could do something to brighten kids' lives. So I went to a local toy store and bought a ton of toys and brought them in. The toy store found out what I was doing and decided to donate toys after that.
He shrugged.
It just kind of took off from there.
Brie cocked her head and studied him. She had never met anyone like Jesse. He willingly gave up his time and money to help others. A tiny piece of her wondered what that would feel like. When the elevator stopped, they stepped onto the floor. It looked like every other floor except that the walls were more colorful. Painted murals adorned many of them. Jesse stepped up to the desk and addressed the nurse working there.
Hey, Linda, are there any kids in need of toys today?
Jesse! The woman's eyes lit up and a smile stretched across her lips. Of course, follow me. Linda led the way down the hall past several rooms to an open area. Brie was surprised to see a large playroom. It had toys for kids from all ages, from a small slide to a video game area. There was even a corner filled with stuffed animals and books. Several children lounged about in the room, but the mood in the room was somber. Hey guys, look who's here! Heads swiveled their direction, and then there was an audible and visible shift. Officer Calhoun! The children hurried to him and surrounded him. I'll go let some of the others know, Linda said, as she touched Jesse's shoulder and then walked away.
Hey guys, who's ready for some new toys?
Me! It was a resounding chorus as the kids bounced up and down. Jesse got down on his knees and set down his bags. Surprisingly, the kids didn't tear into them. They waited for him to hand out the goodies. If a child didn't get something they wanted to play with right away, they simply handed it to another child. When his bags were empty, he gestured for Brie to set her bags down.
This is my friend Brie, guys. Can you say hi?
The children smiled and waved, and Brie began handing out the toys in her bags as Jessie had. When her hand reached the last toy, she looked up. Only one girl remained in front of her. A little girl of about 5 with no hair stood there. Hi, sweetie. What's your name? Kyla. I have cancer. Brie's heart broke at the childish innocence. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Would you like a doll? Brie pulled the doll out of the bag and smiled as the girl's eyes lit up. Thank you, Miss Brie. The girl hugged the doll to her chest and walked back to the stuffed animal corner, where she sat down and proceeded to play a game with the dolls and animals. Brie leaned closer to Jesse. I can see why you do this. They all look so happy, and no one is even fighting. He flashed her a sad smile.
Yeah, their perspective changes when they are fighting for their lives.
Brie decided at that moment she was going to do something for these kids. She had the money to spare, after all. They stayed another half hour and then bid their goodbyes to the children. Brie and Jesse were quiet as they left the hospital and walked back to his truck. "Thank you for bringing me here, but can I ask you a question? How do you keep doing this?" His eyes caught hers and his brow furrowed slightly.
"What do you mean?"
Brie shrugged. "I watched my mom die of cancer, and now seeing these kids, I don't know, it just breaks my heart." Concern filled Jesse's eyes, and he grabbed Brie's hand.
"I'm sorry about your mom. I didn't know. I would never have brought you here if I had."
Brie glanced down at their entwined hands. She could feel heat transferring from his hand and slowly climbing up hers. "I'm glad you did. It put things in perspective. But..." She paused and dragged her eyes back up to his. "Does it ever get easier?" Jesse took her other hand and pulled her a little closer, sending a fluttery feeling through her body. What was wrong with her? She wasn't supposed to be feeling anything for him. He was a means to an end.
"I'd love to tell you it does, but I can't. In the 3 years I've been doing this, I've seen a lot of children recover and go into remission. Those times are amazing because your heart fills with joy for them."
His eyes shifted to the side and he cleared his throat before meeting her gaze again.
"But I've also seen kids not recover. That's when I'm glad I have my faith to fall back on. It doesn't make the present pain any less, but at least I know they're up in heaven pain-free."
"You really believe that?"
"I do, and so do millions of others, Brie. If there wasn't a loving God watching out for us, then what would be the point of us being here? Our whole lives would simply consist of going through the motions until we died. That may sound nice, doing whatever you want, but it's no life. It has no meaning, but believing in Jesus gives meaning to life. During this part, our goal is to strive to be like him, to show his love to others. But it doesn't end there. We know there's something even better after this life. We get to reign with Jesus forever afterwards in a place with no sin, the way God intended it."
The words were foreign to Brie. Her father had been too busy running his company to ever take her to church, and she didn't remember going with her mother before she died either. But Jesse's face was sincere, and there was an honest feeling in his words. "Do you think I could come to church with you one day?" She bit the inside of her lip as she waited for his answer. His eyes twinkled, and he squeezed her hands, sending another fluttery feeling up her arms.
"I'd love to take you to church with me. How about this Sunday?"
Brie nodded and stared up at him. They were in a moment, and she knew he could feel it too. She parted her lips, willing him to kiss her. She wanted to know if his mouth would elicit a fire into her the way his hands did. But after a moment of his eyes staring into hers, he dropped her hands and opened the truck door for her. Brie blinked. Had she imagined it then? His attraction? And why wasn't he falling for her the way other men did? Brie had never had an issue getting a man to kiss her. Until now. Now she had been turned down by both Cade and Jesse in less than 2 days. Confused, she climbed up into the truck and folded her hands into her lap. Maybe he was only looking for friendship. The ride back to her apartment was quiet, which made Brie feel worse. She had nothing to do but rehash the feelings and replay the moments over in her head and wonder what went wrong. When he finally found a parking spot on her street, she reached for her handle. But Jesse stayed her arm.
"Wait, Brie, let me walk you up."
She shook her head, tears pricking her eyes. "No, that's not necessary."
"It is, because I need to tell you something. Please?"
Brie shrugged and blinked to keep the tears back. "Fine, if you want." She stepped out of the truck and waited for him to catch up to her. Then they walked back to her apartment in silence. When they reached her door, she turned to him. "So, what did you need to tell me?" He stepped toward her and reached his hand around, cupping her neck and tilting her face up. Brie's breath caught in her throat.
"I wanted to tell you that I don't kiss lightly. When I kiss someone, it means something. And when I first met you, I couldn't imagine kissing you. But I saw someone different today, someone I could date. But I want to be sure. Do you understand?"
The fingers of his other hand traced her lips, sending chills down Brie's spine. An intensity blazed in his eyes that threw her heart into overdrive. She had never felt so connected to someone whom she hadn't kissed. All she could do was nod. Her ability to speak was lost in the feelings between them.
"Good. Now I'd like to see you again. So how about tomorrow, if I don't get called in?"
"I'd like that," Brie managed to whisper. Jesse brushed her lips with his finger one last time before he released her and stepped back.
"Then I'll call you later."
Before she could say anything else, he turned and walked to the elevator. His shoulders and neck were stiff as if he was fighting his own emotion. Brie leaned against her apartment door and put her hand over her chest. Her heart thudded against it. She had never felt anything like that, and now she was certain that kissing Jesse might not only be explosive, but addictive as well.